Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. My arm feels like it's being ripped out of its socket. Henry, please. I grunt. 60 pounds of muscle strain at the end of the leash. It's nylon digging into my wrist. I think of the story my old co-worker, a 50-year-old nurse practitioner named Robin, used to love telling from her time working in the ER. I unwrap Henry's leash from my wrist as the word degloved shudders down my spine. Henry pulls again, hard. I squint in the direction he keeps pulling, trying and failing to see what he is so desperate to smell or chase or pee on. I really need to get this dog into training. My wife would be pissed I'm walking Henry in the dark again, but I can't help that Nebraska gets dark at 7 p.m. in September. She bought us this light-up leash that glows neon green and would be perfect to see what this Dumbo is tugging so hard towards right now, but I always forget to charge it. I feel the weight of the dead and useless leash strung across my chest like a pageant sash. Henry yanks, snapping me out of my reverie and twisting the leash out of my fingers. I stumble forward, barely catching myself from falling to my hands and knees as Henry shoots off into the backyard we're about to pass. All I see is a flash of brown, and then it's dusky swing sets and crickets. God damn it, I hiss between gritted teeth. The dentist has been nagging me about clenching my jaw. He says if I don't stop grinding my teeth, I could crack one. But it's been a nervous habit since as long as I can remember. I bend down and pick up Henry's poop bag, dropped in the commotion, and jog into the backyard in the general direction I saw Henry go. Henry, come here, Bubba. I call out as I weave past the swing set and a scraggly hedge into the next yard. I hear no reply, but the soft crunch of leaves as I jog forward into the next yard. Bubba, here. I whistle, but still am met with silence. I strain my eyes against the growing dim, seeing mostly outlines of houses and trees illuminated by the street lamps. Then I see it. A brown, four-legged streak moving 2 houses down and across the street into the next block. Henry, I call and run in his direction. Fuck, he's fast. I barely make it across the street to the next block before I see him squeeze between 2 hedges into the next yard, north. Henry, stop, I yell, but it's pointless as he's clearly hot on the trail of some small, helpless mammal and has no more ears to listen to me. I am enrolling this dog into training tonight. I swing a leg over the hedge Henry went through, hauling myself forward. The shoelaces of my left sneaker catch as I try to cross the barrier. This time I do fall to my hands and knees. I look up in time to see Henry running full speed down the intersecting road. I can't tell what he's chasing, but quickly he is out of my line of sight, blocked by the house's catty corner to my position on the grass. I stand and brush my hands on my sweats, rubbing the grass off, and then I take off, sprinting in his direction. As I run down the street, I continue to call Henry's name, desperate for a response to know that he has stopped running. I hear none, and I see less. Flashes of brown, gray, and tan streak by my periphery. I pass house after suburban house, quickly glancing over their driveways and manicured front lawns for a glimpse of brown fur. Damn it, Henry, where are you? I gasp, feeling tears begin to prick at the corners of my eyes. I can feel myself moving from slight annoyance to real worry rapidly. I've seen no sight of him for the last 3 blocks. I continue forward, slowing my jog, but continuing to call out Henry's name. I'm having a harder time seeing through the tears and the growing twilight. I can't see past the rows of lit-up front lawns, the backyards shrouded in shadow. Henry could be back there, in a bush or under a porch, and I would never know he's there. Henry, please, I plead. Images of the missing dog posters that line our favorite walking trail are flashing before my eyes. I can feel the lump in my chest moving into my throat, threatening to break out in a sob. Right before my dam breaks, Henry comes skittering out of a backyard to my right, haunches raised and ears flattened to his head. His eyes are so wide, I can see the whites from my spot in the road 15 feet away. I rush towards him as he rushes to me. We meet at the foot of the house's driveway as he presses into my legs and I grab his nylon leash. I gasp in relief and unclench my jaw. My teeth feel like they're groaning as the weight is lifted. Thank God, thank God, thank God. Henry whines as presses harder into my legs, as if he's trying to disappear into them. He is shaking and panting all at the same time. I kneel in front of to him, wrapping my arms around his neck, like I did when he was a puppy, and I was trying to condition him to like hugs. Shh. It's okay, boy. I got you. It's okay. I coo. Did you get scared because you got lost? Or did a rabbit finally decide to fight back? Henry responds with a whine that fades into a shrill yelp. I've never seen him this riled up before. I should call Cassandra. Maybe he also needs to go on trazodone like she's always talking about. I think. I stand up, knees aching after kneeling on the cold asphalt. I scan the houses surrounding me to gain my bearings. They don't look familiar, but it is a big neighborhood. I squint at the street sign at the nearby intersection. Green and white shapes blend together. I huff, frustrated at the deepening twilight's impact on my vision, and pull Henry towards the signs. Henry balks, but eventually scoots alongside me. Kessler and West 64th Street. Well, that doesn't help, I mutter. I glance back the way I came, but all the houses seem the same. Brown siding, 2-story, split level, sloped driveway, cracked concrete. Nothing looks familiar, yet I've walked Henry in the neighborhood by our apartments every evening for the last 3 years we've lived there. Does the neighborhood just go much deeper than I thought? I can feel my teeth clenching again. I grip Henry's leash tighter as I pull out my phone. Apple Maps gives no answers. I stare at the blue circle that marks my current location, Northgate and West 64th Street. I zoom in and out on the screen. Nothing changes. There is no Kessler Street. I am clearly at the corner of Northgate and West 64th Street. I look back up at the street sign and see in reflective white letters, Kessler Street. Okay, I say, dragging out the Y in a way that my dad would have called very Valley Girl. Okay, well, I think this is our sign to go home. Now, Henry, I say, as I turn to walk away from the street corner, giving the leash a gentle tug. I don't want to turn my back to the sign, but I can't explain why. Henry follows with no resistance. I walk to the nearest sidewalk to begin making my way home. I still don't recognize the houses I pass. They're in the distinctive style of the neighborhood that I'm familiar with. Wood siding, front porch, a suburban area created in a hurry. But they lack features I recognize. I know the house by the neighborhood pool has a weeping willow. I know the lawn where there is always a bike laying out. Henry seems back to his regular self, eagerly pulling at the leash ahead of me. The quiet and the dusk that has fully fallen is beginning to unnerve me. I just want to get home. This neighborhood doesn't feel right. Oh my God. Literally, what are you talking about? It's a fucking neighborhood. You sound crazy. I hear the immediate retort in my thoughts and feel my consciousness snapping back to reality. Right. That's right. I'm freaked because Henry ran off and I thought I lost him. That's it. I'm fine. I'm not crazy. I repeat this mantra again and again in my mind as Henry and I pass through blocks and down streets in the general direction of home. Finally, I spot the house with the wraparound porch that I remember. I sigh, unclenching my jaw, which I didn't realize I was holding so tight. But behind the facade of calm and mantras of grounding, I can't shake the knowledge that that street was wrong. It wasn't supposed to be there. Story number 2. Mirage heat beat off the hood of my tuck as the engine cooled with a steady tick. Hot blasts of wind mercilessly drew sweat down my spine as the sun made a lazy descent into the flat of the horizon. It was a slow day, the kind where the world seemed to wilt, cowering into the shadows and longing for the false promise of a cooler night. Crumpled in my pocket were cryptic instructions hastily scribbled onto a torn piece of paper. 1. Full tank. 2. Do not stop. 3. High beams. Stay on. 4. Passenger calls. Shots. My fingers ached for the familiar weight of a cigarette as I squinted at each car that passed by on the half-forgotten 2-lane highway. Gravel crunched under my feet as I paced, wondering if I was in the wrong place. This wasn't a typical meet point, and the permits were baffling. A continuous service superload with all way stations bypassed. No scouting, no communication with the driver, passing off between pilots instead of taking it all the way. When my boss had laid it out, I'd been ready to walk until he slapped the cash down in front of me, enough to keep me from balking at the NDA it came with. Another truck pulled up that I figured must be the lead. I was running chase, but it was also strange that they pulled us from different companies. You here for the trade-off? The other driver asked as he got out, his voice nearly as gruff as the weathered face peering from the shadow of his hat. Yeah, I replied, wondering if he had received the same odd requests as I had. This shit's fucking weird, he muttered, giving me my answer. Are you getting a passenger too? I asked. Sure am, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. He grunted. No sooner had he spoken than a blacked-out SUV pulled up. I couldn't quite place the make as men in tactical gear piled out with automatics strapped across their backs. We both balked, looking at each other as they unloaded crates and marched our way. Are you the pilot drivers? One of them asked, while the others surrounded our vehicles. What the hell are you doing to my truck? The other driver balked. It was in the disclosure, the man dismissed, eyes devoid of any emotion. The fuck it was, he argued. Is there going to be a problem? The man asked, his voice dropping to a deadly tone. The driver grew quiet, and I wondered if he was also thinking about the wad of cash that had been quick to shut up my own worries. Even so, my skin prickled as they pulled out massive spotlights and mounted them to the brackets on top of my truck. If it hadn't been for my boss's warning to let the passenger outfit the truck however they wanted, I'd have been throwing just as much of a fit. Once satisfied, they filed back into their vehicle and left just as quickly as they'd arrived, save for the 2 left behind to ride with us. Let's go, my passenger stated, sliding the automatic rifle from his back and into position. I fished the keys from my pocket and gave my truck a once-over before jumping in. He was quick to situate himself shotgun while I eyed his weapon warily. Tank full? He asked as he fiddled with the radio. Yes, sir. He pulled a black bag out. "Put your phone in. What is it?" I asked, my forehead scrunched in confusion. "Faraday cage," he said, as though it were obvious, thrusting it towards me harder when I hesitated. With a sigh, I dropped it in and reminded myself that the cash was worth whatever this mess was. He went back to fiddling with the radio until he settled on a static channel before scanning the cabin. "Dump the coffee," he demanded, jerking his head towards the cup of thin, black liquid. "Shit, man. I don't usually do overnights. I was counting on that." "Did they tell you nothing?" he snapped. "Not fucking really," I shot back. "What's with all—" I waved my hands towards him. The guns, the lights. "This? Dump it," he repeated, not acknowledging my question. I went ahead and downed it, the acrid taste rolling over the numb from burning myself on the first sips earlier. "Anything else I should know?" I asked, coughing as I choked down the last of it. His eyes narrowed. "Stay back 20 feet. No more, no less. We do not stop. The lights never go off. If I say, 'Light it up,' hit this button." He pointed to the switch on a wire leading up to the spotlights mounted up top. "No food, no drink. Leave this channel on. Do not touch the CB for any non-essential comms." "What the fuck are we hauling?" I asked. "Proprietary material. Classified." I rubbed my face. It was going to be a long, long night. A buzz sounded at his ear, and his face grew deadly serious before he gave a curt "copy" in response. "Change out in 15, he said to me, his eyes hitting the road and never wavering. Need a smooth transition. Changing out pilots at all was baffling, but once again the cash spoke for itself. When the lumbering form of the semi coming down the road materialized in the hazy distance, I found myself gripping the steering wheel tight. The pilot out front didn't slow as they cut out, the other driver spinning gravel as he rushed to take his place. My palms began to sweat, and my heart picked up a beat as I did the same. The semi didn't slow, and I got my first real look as it slid by. It was at least 16 wide, 16 tall, and 160s long, but I had a feeling it was breaking even superload dimensions. The cab itself was nothing noteworthy but felt off. The trailer was a flatbed with chains as thick around as my leg wrapped over thick black tarps that looked a lot like the bag I'd tossed my phone into. "Go, go, go!" the passenger shouted as the chase fell off, and I hit the gas hard to slid into place. I ended up too close to the rear as I slid into place, and it was as if my truck guttered. All the needles on my gauges dropped, the lights dimmed, and the engine gave a loud hum at the same time the static over the radio cut. "Pull back." 20 feet. I said 20 fucking feet. The passenger yelled, and I slammed the brakes too hard, sending us both jolting. The tarp shifted, but it was so quick I was sure my eyes were playing tricks on me. That, or it was just the relentless wind. "I thought you knew what you were doing," he spat, never tearing his eyes away from the payload. "Oh, I'm sorry," I mocked. It's almost like non-stop pass-offs are a bad fucking idea. His jaw worked, but his eyes never strayed from the payload. "Don't get that close again." "Noted," I mumbled. "Can we listen to music or something?" It was mind-numbing to drive without anything to listen to, and the passenger certainly wasn't willing to talk. The static ground at my sanity, so I tried to focus on the whoosh of asphalt being eaten up by the tires. Every so often, a gust of wind hit hard enough that it drowned out the rest. Roads were dead, so there wasn't much to report in terms of traffic, from behind or incoming. The lead occasionally called out a pothole or debris over the radio, but he may as well have been calling into the void for all the communication that came from the truck. Sunset exploded on the horizon, a bloody spill of bright reds and crackling oranges that seemed impossible against the inky blue drawn in its wake. It was a struggle to pull my eyes from the Technicolor canvas when I was certain I'd never seen one so intense before. The awe was quickly snuffed by a disconcerting dread as the world around us faded into only what was lit up by murky headlights. The fallen darkness seemed deeper than usual, not even a gradient of shadows visible, or the blink of stars. It was claustrophobic as my world narrowed to nothing more than the load ahead. Few cars went by, but each time the passenger tensed until they were well clear of the load. I welcomed the break in the dark monotony, though I felt guilty leaving my high beams on each time it was an incoming passer. Several of the ones who passed us ended up pulled off to the side, with their hazards flashing as we made our way down the road. I called to the lead to watch out for road hazards. He swore the road was clear, but something about that made my skin crawl with nerves. "Quit fidgeting," the passenger commanded, his eyes still not straying from the truck. I asked, needing a distraction. "No." His voice was stern. I sighed, the static seeming to grow louder, even though I knew it was just in my head. It almost seemed to mock the roughness of the road, patterns uncoiling from the chaos before collapsing and slipping away. Straining, it almost seemed as though the variations were taking a cadence, like faraway voices whispering. The words were right there, familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. "Snap out of it," the passenger shouted, panic in his voice as his hand clasped my shoulder. I shook my head, confused, the static nothing more than an annoying buzz in the background again. "Shit, I'm sorry. I must have dozed off or something." "Don't listen to it," he hissed. The static, kind of hard not to when it's the only thing to hear. I said, casting him a sidelong glance. "Don't focus on anything for too long, especially what's in front of you." "Is that some sort of trick for staying awake?" I asked. "No. I could really use a cigarette." I grumbled. "No consumables," he said quickly. "All right," I finally snapped. "What's the deal here? This is fucking weird. If you want to go home after this, don't ask questions and follow the rules." Moving focus around was hard when hyper-aware. Every little sound was a welcome escape from the damned static. I tried to bounce around, my eyes going from the load to the road, to the too dark distance and back again. The chains gleamed in the headlights' beams, but I got caught on an oddity in the folds of the tarp. It started to suck inwards, vacuuming in on itself so slowly that I found myself squinting at it. Just when I was convinced it must be a trick of the light, I noticed the chain was drawn more taut than before, almost seeming to strain outwards, while the folds of the tarp suctioned inwards. The juxtaposition made my eyes swim as though I were seasick. Clack, clack, clack. My head snapped towards the passenger, the movement making nausea roll in my gut. A device strapped to his wrist that I had mistaken for a watch vibrated as the clacking sound grew more frantic. His eyes widened but didn't stray from their mark. "Pull back," he said in a strained voice. "But you said—" "I don't care what I said. Pull back." I slammed on the brakes and the clacking cut out. He took a deep breath of relief that made the tension roll off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was holding. A small laugh left my lips as I glanced out the windows, seeing the familiar roll of scrub brush under moonlight rather than a wall of suffocating blackness. "Load secure?" came the distorted voice of the truck driver over the CB. "Locked down, just a blip," the passenger stated, his voice still shaking. "Is that a dosimeter? This wasn't labeled as a hazmat haul," I asked him in anger. "It isn't, usually. Shouldn't happen again," he said nervously. "The hell is that supposed to mean?" I argued. The CB radio buzzed to life again. "Refuel in 45, 10-mile stretch." "Copy. I thought you said we weren't stopping." I spat. "Where you told nothing?" he snapped. "We've already established that." A refuel truck will meet us on the double-lane stretch and refill on the move. That's illegal, I sputtered, which is why we are doing it at night on the most desolate road in the state. Cops won't be around anyway. How could you be sure? They won't be around, he repeated more firmly. Prickling sweat made my palms slide over the wheel as I started to wonder if that money wasn't worth it after all. My record was clean. I could back out. Word would get out and dry out my contracts for a while. But pilots were always short-staffed. The contracts would come back. A record, though, that could put me out of the industry when it was all I had ever known. You can't back out, the passenger said softly. I wasn't thinking about it, I lied. You'd be a fool not to. Then why are you here, if you know how bad this shit is? I don't have a choice, he said bitterly. Aren't you a merc? Can't you pick your contracts? It's complicated. Well, we could both back out, I offered half-heartedly. His eyes continued to bore into the load. The lights can't go off. Or what? I countered. You don't want to know, he replied with a finality that shut me up. It would be fine. I could invent 1,000 bad endings in my head, but they never came true. This would be no different. At least that's what I told myself. Divide incoming, the lead called. Drop down to 40, right track, the truck driver said, in a voice that somehow sounded like a completely different pitch than before. When I say go, light it up, copy, we both replied. Idling to the side, a strange tanker pulled into the left lane as we took to the right. It was low, with thick metal plates covering the exterior in boxy angles. A man in a full biohazard suit was strapped to the side, with a nozzle roped to his hand. I stared into the dark visor of his gas mask as he slowly passed us to pull up on the truck. Go, the trucker commanded. I smashed the button to bring the floodlights to life. Black spots swam in my vision as I blinked hard against the flash. From the saturation, the view slowly cleared back into focus. Somehow, the load seemed smaller, as though it had shrunk against the onslaught of artificial light. It was brighter than high noon around the truck. I wondered how the trucker could see anything with the light coming from the lead's vehicle as well. As if on the same wavelength, the lead started giving explicit instructions to the driver, acting as his eyes. The man hanging off the side tightened his grip on his harness and leaned forward until he was a breath away from the fuel injection. His entire body stiffened as if electrocuted, his hand moving so slowly as he extended his reach to insert the nozzle that it almost appeared as though time had dilated. A chill ran down my spine, causing the hair on my arms to raise. The moment he made contact, he jerked back hard and slammed into the side of the tanker. Hold, commanded over the radio as the man flailed, going limp. Fuck, we have to do something, I told my passenger, whose only response was to choke up on his gun. The dosimeter went off again and I glanced over to see his panic line his face. My lights brightened to the point I heard a high-pitched whining as though the bulbs were about to pop. A metallic crack rang through the air as every single chain on the load went taut. Yet the tarp's vacuum sealed tight against something that wriggled with no shape. The angles in the folds didn't make sense. It was as if a three-dimensional form had been flattened against a two-dimensional plane. Pull back? I asked, though my voice distorted as though I were talking through an old-timey radio. We can't. Not yet, he said, his hand coming up to wipe bright red blood away from where it trickled out of his nose. Shit, man. Are you okay? I asked frantically, popping open the console to dig for anything that might help. He nodded, though he started to go limp and slump towards me. My foot came off the accelerator as I reached over to prop him up. Just as I fell back, though, the man swinging from the tanker started to convulse. A door on the side flung open, and suited-up arms reached out to drag him back in. "Wake up, come on, wake up," I shouted, fear tainting my voice. With a hard shake of his head, he shot back up, looking around in confusion as though he didn't know where he was. I kept my hand on his shoulder as he shuddered, raising a hand to his nose that came away slick with blood. His eyes turned to me for the first time, the pale blue of his iris shocking against the bloodshot veins snaking across his sclera. "Here," I said, pressing a wad of old napkins against his nose. "Hold this tight. Tilt your head back." His eyes finally snapped into focus, and he swung his gun back into position. "What are you doing? Pull up." "You're fucking welcome," I muttered as I hit the gas again. It was pathetic watching him try and fail to learn forward, his eyes rolling when he tried to regain his earlier focus. The gun slipped from his hands as he pressed them against the dashboard, trying to lift his head and shaking hard as though weight was bearing down on his shoulders. "I can watch it," I offered. "No," he hissed. "I have to make sure it stays in place so you can drive. You aren't much good like this, just tell me what to do." His breathing grew labored, and he finally relented. "Train your eyes on the payload. Move your focus every few seconds. No pattern. Up, down, side. Doesn't matter, just make it random. Go in and out of focus, too. If your sight starts to vanish, call code ICE into the CB." I nodded and did as he instructed. A copper tang filled my mouth, and my fingertips went numb anytime I got too predictable in my movements. Cold started to seep deep into my bones, as though the marrow was freezing from the inside out. Even my knuckles started to crack with each shift of my hands on the steering wheel. "Lane ends 300 feet, called the lead. "Drop down to 20, almost full," the trucker said, his voice heavy as though he was struggling to breathe. "That's too slow," my passenger exclaimed, his palm pressing hard against his forehead as he winced. "Countdown to extraction," the tanker driver called. A long metal pole extended from a porthole in the cab, with a hook on the end. Each heartbeat pounded my ears, growing louder with every passing second. As they counted down over the CB, my thoughts strangled around the numbers. And while I heard them going down, the interpretation in my mind kept going up. I raised my hand to my temple and dug my fingers in, as if that could stop the disconnect. 1 was called out, but 10 flashed in my mind. When the injector was ripped freed, a spill of diesel rained down. The tanker immediately veered hard into the other lane before rolling into a field with a cloud of dust billowing out behind. It caught hard on a rock, jerking upwards, before tipping over and racking along its side until it came to stop, bump back up to speed. The trucker said nonchalantly, as though the tanker hadn't just crashed. "Lower the lights." I started to snap retort back, when the passenger reached out a hand to stop me, shaking his head weakly. "They know the rules," he said with cough. Sighing, I clicked the floodlights off and fell back into the earlier rhythm. I tried to revert my attention back to my eye movements rather than think about the wreckage in my rear view. It was hard when with each tick, I could feel the blood running through my veins and the sinew flexing against my bones. "I can take back over," he said softly. "You sure?" I grunted. "Affirmative," he said, jutting his chin out as he assumed position again. "Look out the side window or something for a while." "Not much to see," I said with a forced laugh. "You're a driver," he said, starting to sound steadier. "Aren't you used to being bored?" "I like seeing it all pass by, even when it's just flat fields of nothing. Reminds me what a small part we are in something bigger." "You like that?" he asked, skeptical. "In the daylight. At night it just feels isolating." like we're not really supposed to be here. Yay, well, that's probably true for this, he said bitterly. I looked over at him. He had gone pale, a sheen to his skin, even though there was an uncomfortable bite to the air that adjusting the AC hadn't seemed to help. He shifted uncomfortably. Thank you, by the way, for what you did back there. No big deal, I shrugged. Why does looking at it do that? It knows who watches, he said grimly. With a clink, the chains relaxed, no longer straining. At the same time, the tarp released outwards until the restraints were nearly obscured in its folds. I couldn't explain why, since no sound came or went, but it was as if my mind went quieter. My passenger laughed, relief palpable in his tone. I think we're going to be okay. Yeah? I asked, laughing alongside him. Yeah, he smiled. Worst part is over. He spoke too soon. Watch out, there's a deer. The lead car called before cutting to silence. I watched in horror as the lead truck careened into the ditch, rolling over and over as it crumpled into an unrecognizable heap. Pieces of glittering metal and blobs of warped flesh littered the road, causing the trucker to weave as he hit the brakes. Light it up, the trucker yelled, and at the same time my passenger was screaming out to not stop. With a click of the switch, the floodlights beamed, but this time they kept brightening until a series of pops took them out one by one, including my headlights. We were too close to the rear of the flatbed when we were plunged into darkness. There was a resounding snap, and the chains burst free. They hit the asphalt in a series of sparks that illuminated the bulging material rising before us. There was no end, no beginning, only it. We were moving, but we were still. From my peripherals, the road slipped past at breakneck speed, even as I hit the brakes. The load kept growing closer, even though the distance between us never breached. For a brief moment, I was reminded of those old movie sets, where the background rotated behind a stationary set piece. The windshield shattered into a spiderweb of glass before falling around us. He had shot the gun, but there was no sound. In fact, there were no sounds at all, not even the slight vibration of tires sliding over the road. It was all consumed by the form that rose high before us. It couldn't have been the load. I had been watching it all night, and the mass it encompassed now was more than could possibly have lain across the flatbed. We didn't crash. I'd swear it on my life. Even so, we were there, and then we weren't. Those moments may have been erased, but I felt in the depths of my being that they never existed at all. We were simply there, and then we were on the ground. I stared up into a sky full of pinpoint stars. They started out still, before slowly whirling around each other, faster and faster, until they were a vortex of pure white, smearing the atmosphere, sucking me in, calling me to their depths, reaching, screaming. I sat up straight. Dry earth crumbled beneath my palms. Confused, I lifted my hand and let it fall from my fingertips. "Move, we have to move," a voice warbled as though it were traveling through water. I shivered as I turned towards it, cocking my head in confusion at the crouched form of the passenger. He reached out hand for me, his mouth moving, but the sound came in and out. A bad connection, I thought casually. He froze. Turning around slowly, my eyes followed to what loomed behind. It was nothing. I strained to focus, but my sight kept slipping off to it. There was a gaping hole before us that didn't exist. I tried to reach forward, but my hand went to the side, and my body went numb. Though I brought my hands together in front of me, they couldn't feel each other. I couldn't even feel the pull of air in my lungs. If I were breathing, it was filtering straight to my cells without being transported through molecular carriers. For that one brief moment, I was nothing. Then, I exploded back to life. Every sound was too loud, every sight too bright, every touch pain. The passenger let loose every round in his clip before loading another to meet the same fate. Each bullet flattened against something. It was all shadow and angles that couldn't be defined. Where it was struck became a point of nothingness. It moved towards us, and the world warped inward as though it were the center of gravity. When the last bullet had been shot, he turned towards me. "Run," he begged, but neither of us could. Our feet may as well have been poured in cement for all the good they did us. Impending doom rang my senses. Accepting my fate, I turned to look at the road in the distance. It was a winding rope with no beginning or end. My truck was laid over in the ditch, the dirt around it unsettled as though something had crawled from it. Flapping in the wind were the torn banners of my oversized load signs, and my flagger was snapped in half. The semi and flatbed were in worse shape, imploded inwards on themselves in shards of jutting metal. The moon was marching the wrong path across the sky, running from the sun instead of chasing it. We should have been well into the night, not just past its fall. I frowned, wondering if I could will myself back under the light of day. Something the passenger had said earlier came back to mind, though it took a few grabs to hold on to the thought. "The rules," I called to him. "It's too late," he cried out. "Just go. I'll try to hold it off as long as I can." "They were to keep it in. Let them go," I continued. "That's not how this works," he said, pulling a pistol free with shaking hands as he faced it head on. He took aim and fired, but the closer it got, the slower his movements became. There was a flash of light that lit up the space around it wrong, like the light was behind the shadows. He looked at me, and I held his eyes, the only thing left I could do as the form closed around him. His skin sunk beneath his muscles in mess of stringy reds before being sucked into the white of his bones. Nerves tangled around his form, lit up in a pulse of electric signals that had once made up all he was. They tightened around his skeletal frame before being consumed into their depths as well. He took 2 steps, the scrape of joints without the slick stretch of ligature grinding, and so quickly that it was hard to believe he'd ever been there at all. He collapsed into puff of dust that was carried away in a breeze that didn't exist. Fear was cold in my veins, reaching beyond those pulsing walls to claw at my throat. If only I could run to the open road. Freedom had always been there, a place where I was nothing, faceless as I moved with the flow of the world around me. If anything could understand, it would. But we had bound and watched it, and it knew. Pulling my lighter from my pocket, I closed my eyes and flicked the flame into existence. The weak heat bounced before me, and I imagined it was a beam of sunlight from high noon. That false breeze tracing my skin was from the open window, and there were still hours to go on my drive. Vibrations beneath my feet were just the smooth of the road slipping away, but really, it was always me. The road never strayed. Deeper. I fell into that trance, so far that I didn't have to convince myself anymore. It felt so real. When I finally dared to open my eyes, though, it wasn't to meet the embrace of my fate. It was to the light of day. Blinking hard, I looked around the empty road. I kicked at the hot asphalt, a sticky chunk breaking away under the toe of boot. Heat rose in waves around me, my clothes already drenched in sweat that begging for the relief only a gust of wind could bring. Grassy fields waved around me, and the form of a car wavered in the distance. I tried to wave it down, and it slowed, but continued without stopping. A few more did the same before a state trooper finally pulled over. "What are you doing out here? There's nothing for miles," he asked. There, back that way. I was in a wreck," I stammered. He frowned, pulling down his reflective sunglasses. Just came from that way. Didn't see anything. You go off-road? Not my truck, no, I said, my eyebrows furrowing in confusion. After looking me over, he motioned for me to get in. Sounds like heat's getting to you. Dehydration'll do that, you know. Let's get you back to town. I'll send one of the boys to check it out. I nodded and complied, still in a daze. He handed me a warm bottle of water, but I guzzled it down. He fiddled with the radio, and when the hum of static buzzed, I gritted my teeth so hard a tooth cracked. You okay? He asked. How long you been out there? Don't know, I answered, honestly. He huffed, but left me in silence as we made our way back to the station. I leaned my head against the glass, looking up into the puffy white clouds and breathing deeply. It felt like borrowed time, like I wasn't really supposed to be there. At the station, they confirmed there were no signs of any wrecks along the highway. Confused, I called my boss on their landline, my eyes trained on the television playing quietly in the loudly. Local news stories flashed across, nothing out of the ordinary. Some feel-good coverage of a local school sporting event, the town approving a rezoning at the last council meeting, and a nearby fertilizer plant that had caught fire and exploded in a tragic accident. Where have you been? You missed your last assignment. I've been trying to reach you for days, he fumed when he finally picked up. I was in an accident doing that night run you gave me. I didn't give you a night run, he said, sounding genuinely confused. Yes, you did. I dropped my voice, making sure nobody was within earshot. The one with the NDA. Don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. My voice rose. You must be confused, he dismissed. Your truck is here, and it's fine. I nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean it's there? It here, and you need to get here if you want to keep your job. He hung up, and I stared at the receiver before putting it back and walking outside. One of the receptionists came out and asked if I needed a ride to the hospital, but I dismissed her and asked how to get to the nearest bus station. After a series of bus drop-offs, a seedy hotel, and a cab, I finally made it back to my home station. Sure enough, a truck that looked like mine sat in the parking lot. My boss gave me an earful, still denying anything about that trip before throwing the keys at me and telling me to get to my next job. He could say it all he wanted, but it wasn't my truck. The differences were subtle, but after thousands of miles, I knew every detail better than the back of my own hand. Cracks in the leather followed a different pattern. There was a slight difference in pressure on the pedals. Even the hum of the engine was off a pitch. I tried to carry on and forget about that night, but it was always lurking in the back of my mind. It wasn't just my truck that was different. People's voices didn't quite match up with the movement of their mouths. Things in my periphery would shake, but when I turned my head, they were stable. Anytime I turned on the radio, it was like I was hearing double, a quiet voice talking in tune just below the other. Food tasted off, the flavors washed out and bland no matter what I added to it. I'd see grass bend in the wind, but it never brushed my skin. I never touched another cigarette, the pull no longer a vice, but a repulsive burn. Driving back over that road didn't change anything, even when I braved a pass at night. It was just another empty highway. Scouring the news didn't tell me anything, just a stream of local stories and tragedies in line with every other small town. Sometimes I started to believe that I was the crazy one, but then the memories would come back as vivid as if they were replaying before my eyes. Even if I could never prove it, I knew that whatever we had hauled was still out there, and it made me wonder just what dimensions were broken that night. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.